Who are the cultural icons of your generation? Who could you tell from the very beginning of their career they were going to be a legend in 30, 40, 50 years? For my generation, one of those people is Harry Styles. Harry Styles is still in the very beginning of his career, but he has already made huge waves in the music industry and probably will continue to do so for a long time. Now, for me personally, I have been following Harry Styles and his career for about 10 years, so I'm no expert, but I'm probably the closest you're going to get without talking to his immediate family. So today, it's Harry Styles 101. I'm going to take you from the beginning to now. Who is he? What does he do? What is he up to? Everything you need to know about Harry Styles. We're going to be doing that using this handy dandy record. I do want to show it. It's kind of cool. It's 3D. And that this record chronicles his life from the very beginning all the way to the present right now. So when I talk about the beginning, we're talking about February 1st, 1994. Harry Styles is born. Now, he grows up in Cheshire, England, and he is primarily with his mom, his sister, and his stepdad a little bit later on. Now, Harry Styles was musical from day one, so it's no surprise that before he was in a little-known band called One Direction, he was also in a band called White Eskimo with a couple of his friends. This was fun, but it didn't last very long because he wanted to branch out, and so in July of 2010, Harry auditions as a soloist on a show called The X Factor. So he auditions, he makes it on, but he doesn't make it very far. So he's about to be cut until Simon Cowell decides to take him and 4 other boys from the show and make them into a band that would later be known as One Direction. So they're on the show, they do pretty well, they wind up in 3rd place, and Simon Cowell signs them to his record label. So they start making music there. Their first big hit, it's their first single, it's called What Makes You Beautiful, and it came out in 2011, and it was a huge hit, and it just skyrocketed them to fame. So they had this huge song, and we can see their career as they blossomed through the years, and then here they are 4. So yes, one of the members did quit the band in March of 2015. They had already made 4 albums together and gone on 4 world tours at that point, so they were booked constantly. They were busy all the time, and so he left the band. And then in August of that year, no surprise, the band decided that they were going to go on an indefinite hiatus. So they announced this in August of 2015, and they finally went their separate ways in January 2016. So Harry takes this year kind of to himself. He takes a step out of the limelight for a little while because he had just been working constantly for the last 5 years, so he wanted some time for himself. So that's exactly what he did, but come 2017, he's back in the game with his first album. It's called Harry Styles, and it took a little bit of a departure from where we were expecting him to come from. Of course, he came from One Direction. This was it's a bubblegum pop boy band, but this was an album heavily influenced by classic rock, so Elton John, the Beatles, Fleetwood Mac, you name it, that influence is in the album. So people were really pleasantly surprised by what he came out with. So this album did pretty well, and then he also had a movie come out that year that he had a small role in. It's called Dunkirk. You've probably heard of it. It was a pretty big award-winning movie at the time. So he had a small role in that, but his breakthrough really came with his sophomore album, Fine Line. So this album was huge. It still is. It was number 1 on the Billboard 200. And he had quite a few really high charting songs from the album, but the biggest one by far was Watermelon Sugar. Watermelon Sugar wound up charting number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100s. That was a huge milestone for him. It was his first number 1 in the US. So yeah, that song, you can see some photos from the music video here. This was a really big moment for him. So he had that song that kind of came out of it. And Harry Styles is still sort of in this era. He just performed Watermelon Sugar at the Grammys, and this was a really well-received album. Stevie Nicks actually had something to say about it in a Vogue article from November 25th, 2020. So this is what she said. She said, "This record means a lot to me. When it was all put together, I listened and said, oh my God, the Beatles live. A whole lot of people live in these songs. Fleetwood Mac lives there, I live there. When I listen to Fine Line, I hear melodies that would have worked on A Day in the Life. It has that same kind of complexity. I think the Beatles would have thought, here we've influenced a young man who took some incredible things from us and made them his own years and years later." So this was a super well-received album. People really, really liked it. And yeah, like I said, he's still kind of in this moment, but we should be expecting probably some new music from him sometime soon, maybe this year. Now, I want to shift gears a little bit away from his music and talk about his fashion. So, Harry Styles, his clothing have kind of become an entity of their own because he's so unconventional in the way that he dresses. He really kind of came into his own fashion sense post One Direction, and you can see a very drastic change. But he's really known for wearing kind of funky suits, and he's known for gender bending as well, wearing dresses and stuff. But it's a lot of stuff inspired by like 70s and 80s fashion. So you can see that in a lot of what's here. Now, he's become a very polarizing figure in this way. People have a lot to say about his clothing choices. So I want to talk a little bit about this Vogue article. So in Vogue, he was the December 2020 cover of Vogue. And in that article, he said, I think if you get something that you feel amazing in, it's like a superhero outfit. Clothes are there to have fun with and experiment with and play with. What's really exciting is that all of these lines are just kind of crumbling away. When you take away there's clothes for men and there's clothes for women, once you remove any barriers, obviously you open up the arena in which you can play. So he's very much about gender bending, which is why he took this opportunity to be on the cover of Vogue, and he wore a dress, which is something that a lot of people had a lot to say about. So this was kind of an interesting moment because a man had never been on the cover of Vogue in the US. So he did this, and this inspired just a firestorm on social media. So one of the most prominent conservative figures right now, Candace Owens, she had a lot to say about it, and a lot of the storm that followed this cover came from her. So this is what she said on November 14th, 2020. She says, there is no society that can survive without strong men. The East knows this. In the West, the steady feminization of our men at the same time that Marxism is being taught to our children is not a coincidence. It is an outright attack. Bring back manly men. So people had a lot to say about this. People were really mad at him for wearing a dress. But he wound up going on Instagram a couple weeks later, and he did a sort of callback to what she said, and the caption was bring back manly men. So he doesn't really care what people have to say about him as far as his fashion goes. He just kind of wears what he wants. But this was back in 2020. We're now in the present day. He just performed at the Grammys. He opened and he just won his first Grammy. So he's doing really great. And that's really all you need to know about Harry Styles. So I hope you learned something. This has been your guide to Harry Styles.